Welcome back. We're talking with Sara Ondrako about Operation Sidekick and how it has bettered the well-being of pit bulls and veterans. And Sara, I'm so glad you could hang around. This is just fascinating to me. You know, we were talking in the first segment about how you match up a dog, but I know this costs money. I mean, how do you fund yourself? Where does this money come from?
It's all primarily public donations from people that support the program. And as I always tell people, this really is a community problem. So it's great to see the community come together to solve it. But it's mostly community private donations. I do some grant writing from time to time, but it is difficult to keep the sustainability happening because we're constantly asking for the next donation. We're constantly asking for the next grant. It takes about $10,000 a dog for us to raise it from the time that it's born all the way up through 18 months of training, just with vet care, with training, spay neuter, microchipping, the equipment, just everything from her vest, collar, leash, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it takes a considerable amount of funding. We've managed to really mitigate some of those costs by our partnerships with our veterinary community, with our local spay neuter clinic, by utilizing really good fosters and volunteers, but there's still a significant cost associated to it that we constantly have to fundraise for.
Well, you can't be the only one training the dogs. How many people do you have involved, or are you? I mean, I should always know the answer to the question I ask, but how many folks help you train dogs? Because I'm guessing the demand is probably quite high for them.
Yeah, and I wish we could fill it. We can't. We get requests every single day. I've been struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm 50% disabled, I'm 100% disabled, and I would love to help every one of them, but we need to scale this program to be able to do that, and we need more people willing to help out with it, willing to volunteer and to foster. Training-wise, it's difficult. It's a different skill set, but with our volunteers, we train our volunteers as well. So yes, I am the lead trainer, and I train the majority of them. I always have my hands on all of our dogs, especially early on and all the way through the process. But I do rely sometimes, occasionally, on a handful of trainers that have helped us in the past in our community. I know that they can kind of step in if we have too much going on. You know, when we start off, we have 9, 10 puppies at a time. So sometimes they'll break off and do group classes or some one-on-one sessions with the fosters. So I've been lucky to be able to kind of lean on and rely on some other community trainers from time to time when we need help. We've tried to bring in a full-time trainer before, and we haven't had a lot of success with that just yet, but I'm certainly open to bringing in more people that have that skill set or are willing to learn it, because I'm happy to teach it.
Well, maybe some stats now. How big is the demand? We talked at the beginning of the show about 22 veterans committing suicide. So those who are suffering from mental illness and need something like this, how high a number are we talking about?
Well, I'll give you a snapshot. So I'm in the Charlotte region, Charlotte-Mecklenburg County, and our region typically has about 50,000 veterans at any given point in time living there. The PTSD rates, because the stats are not very consistent on that, are upwards in the way of 30 to 40%. So think just in the population where I am in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, 30 to 40% of the population of 50,000 veterans living there, struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder and in need. So they go through all these different treatments, some work, some don't, and they're really leaning towards, statistically speaking, again, not a lot of research on this yet, but two very impactful and beneficial treatments being cognitive behavior therapy and service dogs. So they're kind of weaning away from a lot of these different medications that seem to numb the symptoms or numb the situation but not correct or fix it, and leaning more towards things like cognitive behavior therapy and service dog work. So it's just a snapshot of the population in need. And then also, the other thing that's interesting is it really varies war to war, at least as what is reported anyhow. So your Vietnam veteran has a different PTSD rate than a veteran from Afghanistan, which I think is really interesting.
How does the service dog help? I mean, you must have some anecdotes that you can share with us.
Sure.
At least maybe you could do that for us to help us understand how a veteran who is in need of a dog like this, how do they interact and what happens, how it changes?
Sure. So the behaviors that veterans are experiencing that cause some difficulty with them leading normal lives is what we want to address. We want to make their lives as normal as possible. You think about veterans that are uncomfortable, they're hypervigilant, they always have to sit with their back against a wall in a restaurant, they can't be in large crowds. And these are just some examples. Not every veteran with PTSD is this way. These are just some examples for you. Panic attacks, mobility issues, different things like that. These are all things that dogs can help with. They can open and close doors, they can call 911, they can retrieve things. They can, one of the coolest things I think that they can do is bring somebody out of a flashback. So flashbacks are very real and very scary, and they often cause veterans to shut down and kind of hermitize. So if the dog can mitigate that situation and make it as less traumatic and less stressful for them as possible, because essentially they're reliving trauma during that time, then they're able to recover better. And that makes a huge impact on the way that they live their lives day to day.
Now, it seems like you're fighting the same battle, but maybe on two different fronts. You have the stigma of mental illness with veterans, and then, of course, the stigma that pit bulls have more or less been demonized this time around. How are you going about fighting that? It's going to be difficult, first of all, with pit bulls. What's the initial reaction when they hear that you have a pit bull service animal?
It's almost one of those things where it's like, here, hold my beer. You know? Tell me I can't do that. I have it easy, to be honest. I work with a population of dogs. Again, they're eager people pleasers. They want to work. I mean, you can see Scotty, she's staring at me the whole time. What's coming next? What do we do next, right? So I kind of have it easy in that sense. And then, I mean, with the veteran population, they're so desperate for a solution that they're willing to do anything. They're some of the best listeners I've ever worked with. So when it comes to putting the two of them together, they just flow beautifully. They really do. The veteran really wants it, and you have to really want it to make it happen. And the dogs really want it too, and that makes my job a lot easier.
I imagine the reception you've gotten from both communities, the community at large, the animal community, rescuing animals is always very popular. Not a lot of people do it. And then, of course, the veterans, and I know what kind of impact it has on them. What has been the response from the community, just in general, about what it is you do?
It's been primarily all positive, but all over the map. I've literally gotten an email cussing me out, saying that how could I put these demon spawn with these baby killers with our veterans, but that is very, very minimal. We primarily get a lot of positive outpour that we're actually trying to actively solve a very big problem amongst our veteran population. So for the most part, especially the veterans that we work with and talk to and that help us through our training process to better understand the veteran side of things, because we're mostly the dog side of things, they're very supportive. They provide excellent feedback that we can actually use and kind of grow our program, because we're still pretty young. I mean, we launched this idea in 2015. So in the grand scheme of things, we're still a work in progress, and they have been fantastic at saying, we love this, that doesn't really work for us, or maybe more of this, maybe less of that. So the response has been overwhelmingly positive. Initially, the breeder programs that we approached about, hey, can we follow you? Can we shadow you? Can we be a part of your program? We're kind of like, you're gonna do what with pit bulls? Sure, you can come learn from us. And so we did, and then after spending a lot of time with various different breeding programs, they're like, wow, this is a great idea. We're on board, we love it. So even those that kind of initially drug their feet a little bit about the idea, once they see these dogs in action and they see firsthand what they do for the veterans that they serve, they love it, and they're very supportive of it.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Well, don't go away. We will return, and we'll tell you how you can get involved with Operation Sidekick. Stick around.